Well, as you know, the Kings season wrapped up over the weekend, so what's going to happen in the offseason? What's going to happen next year? ABC 10's Kevin John, that's the man, just spoke to the team's general manager, Scott Perry, and the head coach, Doug Christie. What did they tell you, Kevin? Anything optimistic, or are they blowing sunshine somewhere?
You know, I wouldn't say they're blowing sunshine anywhere. What they are doing is they're blowing optimism a lot of places, and they're also taking accountability, Walt. So let's just say what it is, okay? This season, by no means necessary was a success. They obviously underachieved. They fell way below expectations. But Walt, the theme of this press conference was the adversity the Kings faced this year. Just to put things into perspective on how much adversity this team faced, there were 34 different starting lineups throughout this season. Also, Walt, over 290 games were missed collectively from all the players who were injured. So yes, while GM Scott Perry made it very clear that he's not going to make excuses for what happened, they did have to acknowledge the unfortunate adversity that affected this team. Another thing that was brought up in these end-of-the-year press conferences was the fact that the Kings never really had a point guard or a consistent point guard throughout the whole season. Doug Christie said himself, you got to have consistency with that. That is the quarterback on the court. You need consistency with that position. So that was one of the things they said they really need to work on during the offseason, heading into the draft. And while we're talking about this draft, Walt, this is one of the most loaded drafts that we've seen probably in the last decade or so. So both Scott Perry and Doug Christie were extremely happy, desirable, hopeful with this draft coming up in a couple of months, because the Kings should have a top 5 pick in that. And the last thing I wanted to say, Walt, is that one of the things that Scott Perry said is he wants to build sustainable success here with the Sacramento Kings. He said, we don't want to be a one-hit wonder. We want to have success for years to come. So with that being said, he's talking about building something here and telling the Kings fans to be patient as they try to build this. But Walt, you know as much as I know, these Kings fans have already exercised a lot of patience over the last 20 years. But we're just looking ahead to the draft now, Walt. And
I could say Dennis Schroeder was a point guard, and he started the season as the point guard. So there is that. Also, and I want to ask you this, are they going to go for sort of a tank season next year, or are they going to try to compete and with the pieces they have and maybe get a play-in or a better seed? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, first things first, that tank word is probably the one word that this Kings organization is not subscribing to. Of course, there was the investigation by the NBA last week on whether or not the Kings were taken. So from what I gathered from this press conference here, Walt, the Kings are not going to tank. They're going to try to put their best foot out there next year, and that includes the collection of young players they have this year. As a matter of fact, Doug Christie said this was one of the most talented rookie classes that he's had in franchise history with this Kings team. So they're very high on the rookie class. They're very high on getting a high draft pick. And with the veterans, Sabonis, DeRozan, depending who's going to be on this team next year, Scott Perry says they are going after it next year. So while I don't want to use the tank word, Walt, I think they're going to try to be competitive.
Okay, well, that's sort of where we want to know going forward what next year is going to be like for people who are thinking of season tickets and all that kind of stuff. Okay, Kevin, I know you're going to have much more in the later newscast, and we thank you for that update after meeting with Scott Perry and Doug Christie. Thank you, Kevin.